Hello, good morning. You are watching AFK Newsroom, and this is your host, Dr. Ajaz. And in today's program, we are going to discuss US Iran nuclear talks, the war debate, and the economic aftermath. Uh, in a mountain Swiss report overlooking Lake Lucerne, American and Iranian diplomats sat across from each other this week and tried to negotiate an end of a war that has shaken the world's energy markets, rattled the U.S. Congress, and cost taxpayers close to $100 billion and counting. Uh, After nearly 4 months of conflict, a fragile ceasefire, and marathon overnight negotiations, the United States and Iran have agreed on what Vice President J.D. Vance called a foundation, not a house yet, but a foundation for a final peace deal. Tonight, we break down everything you need to know: what happened in Switzerland, why nuclear inspections remain the single biggest obstacle to a lasting agreement, what and why the US Senate just voted for the first time to try to stop this war, and what 87.6 billion dollars in new war spending means for the American economy. This story is not over, but it may be at a turning point, and let's get into it. To understand where we are today, we need to understand how fast and how dramatically this situation has moved. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched large scale coordinated airstrikes on Iran under Operation Epic Fury, targeting military installations, nuclear sites, and the country's senior leaderships, including the assassination of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei and other scientists. Iran's response was swift and severe. It launched missile barrages on Israel cities and American military bases in Gulf, and on March 4th, Iran made a move that sent shockwaves through every major economy in the world. It declared the Strait of Hormuz closed. The Strait of Hormuz is not just a waterway, it is a single uh, most critical energy choke point on the planet. Roughly 27% percent of the world's maritime crude oil trade flows through its narrow passage. The International Energy Agency, uh, IAEA, called the disruption that followed the largest supply shock in the history of the global uh, oil market. But Brent crude surged past $120 on barrel, $120 a barrel. European gas benchmarks nearly doubled. Countries from the Philippines to Zimbabwe declared fuel emergencies. For 2 months, the economic pain was acute and global. Then, in April, a temporary ceasefire was announced. Talks uh, collapsed, began and collapsed, resumed, and finally, on June 17th, President Trump and Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian signed a memorandum of understanding at the Palace of Versailles following the G7 summit. It set a 60-day clock for a comprehensive final deal. Uh, 4 days later, the first formal negotiations under that framework opened in Switzerland, and Uh, that is where we are right now. The venue, the players, and the stakes are matters a lot. The talks took place at the Birkenstock luxury resort complex overlooking Lake Lucerne, the same location that hosted Ukraine peace discussions in 2024. The time the delegations were uh, far more consequential on the American side. Vice President J.D. Vance leading, flanked by Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. On the Iranian side, Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bakr Ghalibaf and Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi mediating the process. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif, Pakistan's Army Chief Field Marshal Asif Munir, and Qatar's Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman Al Thani. Um, the summit had a rocky start. Iran's delegation it initially walked out after President Trump posted on social media demanding that, quote, according to Trump, Iran must immediately stop their highly paid proxies in Lebanon from causing trouble, an apparent reference to Hezbollah. Iran's chief negotiator Ghalibaf issued a terse warning. Our armored forces are ready to respond in a different manner, and the Iranian delegation briefly left the table. What happened next illustrates the unusual nature of these negotiations. Despite the walkout dominating social media, talks continued for 9 more hours. Vance later told reporters to, quote, mistrust a little bit what you see coming out of Iranian social media. The discussions ran deeply into the night. The joint statement from mediators Qatar and Pakistan confirmed agreement on what they called a roadmap toward reaching a final deal within 60 days, with three working groups um, established on nuclear issues, sanctions, and dispute resolution. A critical early deliverable was a deconfliction line between the US, Iran, and Lebanon, a direct communication channel to prevent the fighting in southern Lebanon from derailing the broader deal. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi declared the talks had produced major progress, citing waivers on oil and petrochemical export, the lifting of the port blockade, and the release of some frozen Iranian assets, and the launch of a reconstruction plan. American officials confirmed what was called one of the most significant early milestones. Iran has agreed to allow IAEA nuclear inspectors back into the country. The final deal is the house. We set the foundation. We have not built the house, but we have led a successful foundation to get to a good place for the American people. Uh, Vice President J.D. Vance led Lucerne, Switzerland, June 22nd, 2026. However, Iranian President uh, Pezeshkian made clear in a separate statement that Tehran would not uh, relinquish relinquish its right to enrich uranium, drawing a line that goes to the heart of the remaining disagreement. Technical talks are set to continue through the coming weeks under the high level committee established at Virgin Stock. The 60-day clock is running. Here is the core tension in these negotiations, and it comes down to one fundamental question. Uh, can the United States verify what Iran is actually doing with its nuclear program? The American position is non negotiable on two demands. First, the International Atomic Energy Agency and the IAEA, and which is the which is the United Nations nuclear watchdog, must be allowed back inside Iran to conduct independent inspections of its facilities. Second, Iran must address uh, must address and account for its existing stockpile of highly enriched uranium. Enriched to near weapons grade is a key ingredient for a nuclear device, and the United States wants verifiable answers about how much Iran has, where it is, and what happens to it. The agreement by Iran to inspect invite IAEA inspectors back was described by Vance as a major milestone. It is in one sense, Iran expelled IAEA inspectors in early phases of the conflict, representing a complete breakdown of international nuclear monitoring. Allowing them back in opens the door to verification. But experienced non-proliferation analysts caution that an invitation is not the same as unfettered access. The 2015 JCPOA Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, that negotiated under President Obama, provided a detailed framework for IAEA access, and Iran worked within it for years. For years before President uh, Trump pulled out of the deal in 2018. What the current negotiations have yet specified is exactly what level of access inspectors will receive and what they will be permitted to examine. Uh, Here is the question: what about the gap between US and Iranian accounts? There is already a visible credibility gap between what American and Iranian officials are saying publicly. US officials have repeatedly uh, characterized the Switzerland talks as producing uh, progress on a nuclear file. Iranian officials have disputed some of the benefits, particularly regarding the timeline for inspection and the conditions attached. This pattern, where both sides claim success while publicly disagreeing on the details, is a diplomatic warning sign. If It often indicates that the framework agreement papers over unresolved substantive differences that will eventually have to be confronted. Senior Republican senators who have reviewed the terms have said publicly that if the outcome of this negotiation is simply a return to the terms of the 2015 JCPOA with the different language, that would be, in their words, an absolute catastrophe, uh, catastrophe given the cost already paid. The 60-day clock is ticking. Nuclear uh, nuclear working groups are meeting, and the technical gap between what Washington demands and what Tehran will accept remain the central unresolved problem. Uh, what about the historic Senate vote? While diplomats were negotiating in Switzerland, something remarkable and historically unusual happened on Capitol Hill. On Tuesday, June 23rd, the United States Senate voted 50 to 58 to approve a war powers resolution seeking to halt US military operations against Iran. It was the 10th time the Senate had tried to pass such a resolution since the war began in February. But it was the first time it succeeded. That turnaround from nine failures to one stunning passage tells you something important about how Republican senators are reading the political landscape healing into November's midterm elections. Then what the resolution does and what does not do. Let's be precise about what this vote means in practical terms. The resolution is largely symbolic. It doesn't immediately halt military operations. The Trump administration has challenged the constitutionally constitutionality of the War Powers Act itself, arguing the president has broad independent authority to conduct military operations. And even if the resolution were to carry the full force of law, it would face an almost certain presidential veto. The House had already approved its version of the resolution earlier this month on June 3rd by a vote of 215 to 208, with four Republicans breaking ranks to join Democrats. That vote was itself described as bipartisan rebook of the administration's handling of the war. But now both chambers have passed the resolution, a political message that cannot be entirely dismissed. Then why Republican? The question comes: why Republicans are breaking? The more significant story is what the vote reveals about fractures within the Republican Party. The Iran conflict was launched without a formal authorization of force from Congress, a legally contested move that has made many Republican lawmakers uncomfortable. Some are facing questions from constituents about why a war uh, that cost an estimated $100 billion was started without a congressional vote. Then Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, who led Democratic efforts in the Senate, framed the vote as an opportunity to according to him, step back and assess what should the next chapter be. Senate Mike Rounds of South Dakota offered a different Republican view by saying, expressing support for giving the president time to complete negotiations, while making clear in his words that none of us trust the Iranians. According to senior Republican senator who spoke on conditional on condition of anonymity, Trump was not pleased with the senators who voted for the resolution and reportedly engaged in a shouting match with one Republican senator during a private White House lunch the day the $87.6 billion funding request was submitted to Congress. Then on Wednesday, uh, June 24th, the same day Trump met with Republican senators on Capitol Hill over the war resolution vote. The White House's Office of Management and Budget sent Congress um, a formal request for $87.6 billion in supplemental spending. It is one of the largest emergency war funding requests in recent American history. What the money is for, according to the experts and according to my point of view, the bulk of the request, approximately $80 billion, goes to the Defense Department to cover costs um, related to Operation Epic Fury, uh, replenishing weapons stockpiles, munitions procurement, and strengthening U.S. industrial base capabilities. 11.1 billion dollars in economic assistance for American farmers who have been hit hard by the Iran war's disruption to fertilizer supply chain and globally commodity markets. 1.4 billion dollars for the Ebola outbreak in Central Africa, a separate humanitarian crisis included in the package. $1 billion towards Penn Station reconstruction in New York City, an apparent sweetener aimed at Democratic congressional leaders Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, and $500 million for restoration of Washington D.C. construction projects. The political minefield is while talking about the political minefield, the timing of this request could hardly be more politically awkward for the White House. It was submitted the same day the Senate voted to limit Trump's war powers. It arrives as the majority of Americans are already dealing with elevated fuel prices and cost of living pressures directly linked to the conflict. Senate appropriations, Party Democrat Patty Murray put it bluntly, this is not merely paying for the president's war, but an attempt to secure tens of billions of additional dollars for unrelated Pentagon priorities, noting that the Department of Defense already sits on over $100 billion in unspent funds from the Republicans' own budget legislation. The request is expected to face significant debate and possibly defeat in Congress. It could force vulnerable Republican incumbents to take a public position on additional war spending just months before the November midterms. The political question: do you vote to fund a war most of your constituents now oppose, or do you vote against your president? When asked directly why Americans should support more spending on this conflict, Trump's answer was characteristic: because Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. He repeated this line 3 times. Then the Strait of Hormuz. How we can ignore the Strait of Hormuz and the world's most expensive choke point? So let's put the Strait of Hormuz in perspective. At its narrowest point, it is just 34 kilometers wide, about 21 miles. Through that passage flows roughly 20% of the world's uh, seaborne crude oil and a substantial share of the world's liquefied natural gas. When Iran closed it on March 4th, um, the consequences were immediate and global. The International Energy Agency described the situation as the greatest global energy security challenge in history. Brent crude surged past $120 a barrel. Qatar Energy declared a force majeure on all contracts countries across the Middle East, which depend on the strait for over 80% of their food imports, faced simultaneously energy and food emergencies. Europe, already dealing with low gas storage reserves after a harsh winter, saw its gas benchmarks nearly double. Um, if and where markets stand now. Since the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding on June 17th, oil markets have responded positively. Brent crude has fallen back to approximately $78 a barrel, still about 7% higher than before the war began, uh, but down dramatically from the peak. The market, as one analyst at Venda Insights put it, is front running the prospective reopening of the strait and pricing in the best case scenario. That same analyst issued a caution worth repeating: the potential hiccups from logistics to renewed geopolitical tensions or are not being adequately factored in, and that caution uh, per, uh, proved persistent. 1 June on June 20th, just days after the memorandum of understanding was signed, Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps announced it was reclosing the strait, citing continued Israeli strikes in Lebanon as a violation of the agreement. The United States military denied that characterization. Shipping briefly stalled again. Then what consumers are still feeling in United States of America and around the globe are, despite the recent easing, the economic damage from 4 months of disruption does not simply disappear when a deal is signed. Congressional, the congressional I'm sorry for his interruption. The Congressional Research Service, the non-partisan research arms of Congress, has noted that the magnitude of sustained price effects on American gasoline and diesel could persist as a function of both the actual supply disruption and the ongoing going uncertainty around the deal's implementation. American consumers have been paying higher fuel prices, higher transportation costs, and higher prices for goods across supply chains that were disrupted uh, during the Hormuz closure. Farmers face higher fertilizer costs, which is part of why the 11.1 billion in farmer assistance made it into the supplemental spending request. The full economic accounting of Operation Epic Fury has not yet been completed. Then where this stands, this agreement and this deal, where this deal stands. So where does this leave us? The United States and Iran have agreed on a roadmap, but not on a destination. The 60-day clock established by the Memorandum of Understanding means that a final framework must be reached by approximately mid-August. Technical working groups on nuclear issues, sanctions, and dispute resolution are meeting this week in Switzerland. The agreement to invite IAEA inspectors back is real and meaningful progress, but Iran's um, public insistence on its right to enrich uranium suggests the most critical substantive uh, dispute has not been resolved. It has been deferred. The difference between a framework and um, the difference between a framework that addresses weapons development and one that merely returns to the 2015 status quo will be the defining issue of the next 60 days. The what about the Lebanon wild card? Fighting between Israeli forces and Hezbollah in southern Lebanon has repeatedly threatened to derail negotiations. Iran has used Israeli strikes in Lebanon as justification for reclosing the Strait of Hormuz. Israel has its own strategic interests that do not necessarily align with the Trump administration's peace timeline. The deconfliction mechanism agreed in Switzerland is a first step, but as long as Israeli military operations continue in Lebanon, the ceasefire remains fragile. And congressional pressure is also is also playing very prominent role. The war powers vote and the debate over the $87.6 billion supplemental will keep the Iran conflict politically alive in Washington. Republican senators up for re-election in November are navigating an uncomfortable position between presidential loyalty and constituent concern over the cost and conduct of the war. The political pressure may become an asset for negotiators if congressional pushback signals to Iran that the American appetite for continued conflict is limited. Tehran may see more reasons to reach an agreement. Then implementations, not just signatures, matters. Yeah, simply implementation matters, not just signatures. As the Wanda Insights analyst noted, the hardest part, delivering on pledges and promises, is yet to come. Diplomacy at the summit level is different from the technical day-to-day work of implementing a ceasefire, establishing IAEA access protocols, unwinding sanctions, and uh, releasing um, releasing frozen assets. The history of United States and Iran negotiations is one of the agreements that the unravel in the implementation phase. Whether this time is different will depend on working level talks that are happening now away from the cameras. Here is the bulletin line as of today, June 26, 2026. The United States and Iran are talking seriously and directly. For the first time in the context of an active ceasefire framework, Iran has agreed to allow nuclear inspectors back into the country. A 60-day clock is running toward a final deal. Oil markets have partially stabilized, but the nuclear standoff is not resolved. The Lebanon ceasefire is not solid. The United States Congress has sent an unmistakable signal that the political support for continued conflict is eroding, and the White House is asking taxpayers for nearly $90 billion more to cover a war that was launched without a congressional vote. The foundation, as Vice President J.D. Vance put it, has been led. Whether a house gets built on it and whether it holds is a question that will define American foreign policy for the rest of this year. We will be covering every development in these negotiations as they happen. Uh, Subscribe to this channel for real-time updates. Drop your questions in the comments, and we read every one of them. I am Dr. Ejaz, and thanks for watching. And take care of yourself and take care of your channel, AFK Newsroom. Goodbye.